What's going on, ladies and gents, boys and girls, guardians of all ages, Joker back again once again. And with keeping in the theme of talking about things that I'm interested to see develop over the next year with the release of Witch Queen, we come to the rework of the light-based subclasses. For those of you who do not know, Destiny 2 will be reworking all of the light-based subclasses. Not necessarily from the ground up, but close enough. Breaking them apart from the rigid, dumbed-down diamonds that we've had for years, and transposing them into the stasis system, starting with the Void subclasses with the release of Witch Queen. There's a lot to go over, so let's get straight to business. In the first section of the update, where Bungie unveils their plans for the Void subclasses, not only did Bungie state that they put the new Darkness subclass that was rumored to release with Witch Queen on hold, but they also revealed that any remaining stasis fragments that people thought would come out during Season of the Lost have also been shelved at this time, as rebalancing Destiny as a whole and the light-based subclasses is more important. And honestly, I think this is categorically the right call. Stasis was an interesting experiment. Say what you will about the stasis subclasses and the nerfs or how it was released, it was an interesting experiment, but not an experiment we necessarily need to repeat at this time. Remember, stasis released the way that it did because the sandbox design team somehow, some way, through some Herculean leap in logic that us mere mortals will never be able to comprehend, did not understand, could not wrap their mind around how stopping and or slowing someone in a movement-based game could be detrimental to the health of that movement-based game. Whether you like stasis or not, you have to admit the fact that the dev team didn't realize how that would affect the game is a pretty big red flag. So rushing to create the next big subclass after we just dealt with stasis is not the best of ideas. More so when Bungie generally ties these new subclasses to the DLC that they're released in, meaning we once again could potentially see ourselves going through the cycle of this really cool new subclass is released, part of the community loves it, part of the community hates it, and 6 months later it gets nerfed into the ground, and then the people who bought the expansion specifically for that subclass once again feel robbed. So I think it's just categorically the right idea to put any new subclass on the back burner, give it time to cook, to breathe, to be perfected, to be balanced, and then release it. Not try to rush the creation of these subclasses for the release of Witch Queen just so you can check off a box as far as content is concerned with the new expansion. Any new future subclasses need to play well with the current sandbox, at least at the time, when it releases. And I do think part of that comes hand in hand with bringing the old light subclasses up to what is potentially the new system for every subclass going forward. That should have happened first, in fact. Who knows, maybe the stasis problem wouldn't have been so bad if the majority of the light-based subclasses, not just one or two, could keep up. This also makes me think that Witch Queen may have been rebooted at some point during development. Well, nothing's definitive on that, and I doubt we'll ever know until Jason Schreier writes a tell-all article. The sudden shift from, aren't these darkness powers cool? We have to find balance between the light and the darkness, to, let's suddenly upgrade all the light subclasses, something Luke Smith said wouldn't happen for years back in December of 2020, along with the delay of Witch Queen, kind of, sort of, adds some credence that maybe once management got shifted around and new management came in, they were like, ooh boy times two. Not too dissimilar from what happened to Destiny 2 back in the day. Again, all of this is speculation for the sake of argument and fun and entertainment. We won't know until we eventually find out one way or another. But I would not be surprised, is all I'm saying. And like I said, delaying any new subclasses and making sure they're right when they're released, while upgrading the light-based subclasses to be the same as the stasis ones, at least in terms of choose your own adventure, is categorically the right call. Good on Bungie for doing it. It shows a restraint that we don't often see from Bungie, given that time after time they have proven to just throw something out there and fix it later. Damn the consequences. But we are around the 4-minute mark, depending on how this gets edited down, and I have digressed pretty far when it comes to my opinion on new subclasses and the state of the game in general, however relevant it may or may not be to framing the changes coming to light-based subclasses in the future. So let's get back to the article. Combat Reforged. Today you're going to read a quick tease on the feature we're calling Void 3.0, a new interpretation of the Void subclass and fantasies. In the coming weeks, you'll hear about changes we're making to how players regenerate ability energy, and how these changes are going to affect PvE and PvP. With our 30th anniversary release, A few examples of changes in the pipeline: a reduction of how many one-shot kill abilities are available in the Crucible, and shifting super energy regeneration so players are rewarded for participating in combat versus waiting for a timer. Later in Year 5, we hope to share more info on an initiative the team is discussing internally right now, making ammo generation a more deterministic and consistently placed experience across all activities. I hope what I'm describing here paints a clear picture. The game is evolving for the better. Destiny 2 is a living game, and as we head into our 5th year, we're looking at how we can evolve the sandbox you know and love to not only create new experiences, but to better polish the ones that haven't had much love since our launch in 2017. We've learned a lot over the years with each iteration of the sandbox, and we're hoping to apply those learnings through Year 5 and beyond. I hope you're all as excited about the future as I am. Now, this is a great vision, something that Destiny can quite often feel like it lacks when it comes to management or the direction of the franchise. Destiny quite often feels like Bungie is just throwing things against a wall and seeing what sticks. So it's good to see them step back and formulate a plan of action with all the stuff that they've learned for not just the last 5 years, but the last 7. At least I hope so, because if not, I guess we have a bunch of really great quote mining material for a video at a later date. Gotta look at the positive side of things. But this is an overly long video, and we are just now coming to what exactly the changes Bungie is going to be making to the Void subclasses. With Void, these are the negative status effects that you will be applying to enemies. Suppression. The target is knocked out of any active abilities, and cannot activate any abilities/movement modes as long as suppression persists. Afflicted enemy AI combatants cannot shoot their weapons. Weaken. The target takes increased damage and has their movement slowed. Enemy AI combatants fire their weapons with decreased accuracy. Volatile. The target is afflicted with unstable void energy and will explode upon taking additional damage or on death. And 3 positive effects that you'll be applying to yourself and allies. Void Overshield. A protective barrier of void light which reduces damage taken from combatants. Invisibility. You vanish from sight and do not appear on enemy radar. Devour. You feast on the energy of your foes. Kills restore you to full health. Grants grenade energy and extends Devour. Now, as Bungie states in the article, these are all things that veteran players of Destiny are relatively on some level familiar with already. However, even though these things currently exist, they're not necessarily the identity of any classes. I mean, of course you have Devourer Locke, whose entire subclass is about Devour, but that's kinda it. So it's really cool to see Bungie taking these design pillars and going, okay, this is what a Void subclass is, this is what we've tried to kind of convey, but not necessarily really succeeded outside of one class or another, but most certainly not across the entire spectrum of classes, and let's rework the classes so that these design elements are present and far more impactful than they currently are, as we'll see when we go over the various aspects and fragments that are being introduced to the Void subclasses. Old dogs, new tricks. To close out this section, here is a preview of some of the new and updated abilities you'll be able to play with once Void 3.0 drops. Shadow Shot, Mobius Quiver, Super. Fire 2 volleys of 3 Void arrows in a cone, which seeks out enemies and spawns Void anchors on impact. Shadow Shot makes tethered enemies volatile and deals increased damage to tethered targets. One of the main usability pain points of the current iteration of Mobius Quiver is having to press the super input a whole bunch of times for each arrow individually, which is cumbersome and takes a lot of time, and often results in the player drifting somewhere they did not intend to be, off the side of a cliff, as a totally hypothetical example. By firing multiple arrows at once, it should be a lot easier to blanket an area with traps in preparation for a fight, or put burst damage on a boss. So this is a really good change. I'm thinking this will be something along the lines of a Void Arrow Blade Barrage, and honestly, probably should have been how the super shipped. So if nothing else, it's a good quality of life change. Stylish Executioner Aspect. Defeating a weakened, suppressed, or volatile target grants invisibility and true sight. After performing a stylish execution, your next melee attack, while invisible, weakens enemies. Bungie states that this is a twist on Middle Tree Nightstalker's current Flawless Executioner perk. This aspect lets the hunter specialize in defeating debuffed enemies to keep looping their invisibility. That just sounds like a lot of fun. It also sounds like it'd be great for speedrunning higher tier content. Sentinel Titan, Overwatch Aspect, casting a Void-empowered barricade to grant Void Overshield to yourself and nearby allies. The empowered barricade slowly regenerates the Void Overshield of allies bunkering behind it. So this kind of goes back to something we've talked about a bit, where it seems like Bungie is trying to slow the game down. Recently, Rally Barricade got a huge PvE and kind of a PvP buff if you want to use it there, where now instead of just being a shield, it grants a whole bunch of different buffs. There's of course the increased weapon reload speed, but then there's also an increase to stability and range. This isn't terribly viable in PvP to anybody doing anything other than sitting at the back of the map. However, now you have all of those buffs and a regenerating overshield. I can really see entire teams of Defender Titans just running around popping shields for overshields, and that being a real problem. More so when they combine it with tech that they already have that already gives them overshields. So this may be a little too spicy. A 10-second on-command overshield where all you have to do is be in proximity of your barricade or towering barricade? Yeah, that might be a bit much. Shield Toss Projectile Melee. Hurl your shield towards enemies. The shield can ricochet off enemies and surfaces, granting you a small chunk of overshield for each enemy hit. Bungie states, "We want to give Titans more options when it comes to projectile melees. Shield Toss is a great choice for aggressively pushing forward into groups of enemies, softening them up and giving you extra staying power." Captain America Shield Melee sounds cool. Not necessarily sure how practical it'll be in, say, PvP, but in PvE, when you're going into hordes of enemies, you could just jump in and keep punching. That sounds fun. Voidwalker Pocket Singularity Projectile Melee. Launch a tracking unstable ball of void energy that detonates when it nears an enemy, pushing targets away from the blast and making them volatile. Designed as an anti-dive tool and a way to push enemies out of cover. With careful placement, it's possible and incredibly satisfying, and pop their volatile with a well-placed headshot before they hit the ground. I like how creative that is, because it's not just another handheld supernova or celestial fire. It's something different, something unique. I like it. Kind of a handheld tracking tractor cannon. Child of the Old Gods Aspect. Was I the only one who read that and thought Children of the Elder Gods? From Alan Wake. If anybody remembers that, let me know in the comments below. Anyways, Child of the Old Gods Aspect. Cast your rift to summon a sentient black hole, which hovers at your side, waiting for a target. It will launch itself at enemies, then begin siphoning their energy. And weakening them, refunding their life force back to you as either grenade and melee energy, if you're using a healing rift, or health if you're using an empowering rift. Defeating enemies who are being siphoned by the child will refund some rift energy. Bungie goes on to state that Child of the Old Gods is a strong debuff tool that gives Voidwalkers an additional way to lock down an area while sustaining themselves. Yeah, that's basically my thoughts on it. Like, yeah, that's cool. And this kind of goes back to the idea that, again, Bungie is trying to slow down the game, and we see that with them buffing very stationary aspects of the game. And while all this sounds really great on paper, my only fear is slowing down the game too much brings us back to Destiny 2 Year 1, where everybody's just sitting on a corner, EDSing with a scout or a pulse rifle from one side of the map down a lane. The article ends on, "We hope that this preview sparks your curiosity and gets you thinking about new Void builds. Have you ever wanted to run Spectral Blades and Vanishing Step, Ward of Dawn and Controlled Demolition, Handheld Supernova and Devourer? There's a lot of new possibilities, and as we get closer to the Witch Queen, we'll be back in future TWABs to talk about the supers, fragments, and grenades you'll be mixing and matching." Wait. So there's a possibility that I'll be able to mix Shoulder Charge with Knockout and Skullfort? Yo! Get increased melee range and distance after shoulder charging someone? I can't even talk properly. I'm so excited about the thought. Anyways, I really like the idea that Bungie is giving players more choice when it comes to mixing and matching their subclasses. Like I talked about the other day, now if Bungie nerfs an aspect or a fragment, your entire subclass isn't fucked. And it allows you to experiment with things that you might not have picked because it was tied to a bad super. On top of that, it seems like they're adding much needed flavor to these subclasses. Anyways, all of this looks really good on paper. We won't know the extent of the changes or if subclasses will be broken until we see at least the full roster of changes. But those have been my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Remember to like, but only if you did. Subscribe for more. Feel free to donate to my Patreon if you're feeling particularly generous. But above all else, stay frosty.